So as you know, maybe you don't know, Elizabeth Foster has been the driving force here in Chicago for the last 15 years, and we would not be standing here tonight if it wasn't for her and several people who have been inspired by her over the years. My name is Jennifer Edgecombe. I've been involved maybe 13 of the 15 years, and one of the many who have been inspired by Elizabeth and others, and I'm here to introduce our keynote speaker. Dr. David Rothbart is a neurosurgeon who trained at Yale University. He also went to Illinois. I'm going to throw a shout out for that as my alma mater, ILL. ILL. I had a feeling there might be a few of you out there. Thank you. Originally from Chicago, he now lives in Dallas, where he founded the Spine Team Texas, which is one of the largest multidisciplinary spine practices in the country. In addition to being a neurosurgeon, he's an entrepreneur, having founded a number of healthcare-related companies, including one of the first physician-owned hospitals in the country, Harris Methodist Southlake, where he serves as chairman of the board of directors. As if that wasn't enough, he's received numerous awards, including being selected by U.S. News and World Reports as one of the top neurosurgeons in the country. Do we have any other top neurosurgeons in the room? Okay, I didn't think so. All right, Dr. Rothbart has done extensive speaking ranging from scientific topics at national medical meetings to regular TV appearances discussing the latest advances in the treatment of back pain. Anyone in the room with back pain? Excellent. Well, you can speak with him during the dessert reception. However, on a serious note, as we'll hear tonight, and you'll understand why he is here, he is most passionate about speaking about the topic of children overcoming the trauma of abuse. Please help me give a warm welcome to Dr. David Rothbart.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate you reading that introduction exactly as my mother wrote it, so it's very nice of you. What a great event, what a great turnout for a tremendous cause. For the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about three topics: neurosurgery, child abuse, and kindness, which begs the question, how are these three seemingly disparate topics interconnected? And let's start with neurosurgery. For me, that began right here in my hometown of Chicago. As Jennifer said, I'm an Illini. I went to Champaign and went to medical school here in Chicago. And before I traveled out east to do my neurosurgery residency, we're required to do a year of general surgery internship. And that year of my life spent at Cook County Hospital was really incredible. You see, trauma centers are phenomenal experiences for all surgeons in training, because to become a good surgeon, it's more than just learning about techniques and making the diagnosis. Those are important, but you also have to be able to find compassion for those who need it most. And you have to develop the most critical skill set of finding calm within chaos. And let me tell you, Cook County Hospital epitomized chaos. That year of my life was insane. I could write a book just about that 1 year of my life. But I'm going to share one story tonight. One night I'm on call in the trauma room, and I get called there, and at County, gunshot wounds were extraordinarily common injuries. A mother and a daughter were walking in the housing projects where they lived, and when I came in there, I heard that this little girl had been shot, caught in gang crossfire. This little girl was crying hysterically, and her name was Daisy, and I will never forget this little girl. Very cute little girl. I tried to console her, but she'd been shot in the head. There was an entrance wound and there was an exit wound, and it looked like the bullet had just grazed her, but before we did a CT scan, we didn't know if she needed surgery or not. So while that was happening, one of my glorious jobs as the trauma intern was to draw the blood and get the patient ready for the OR. And in County, you did everything yourself. So I drew the labs, and I brought them across the street to the laboratory. But there was one bonus in this whole process. You see, in that building was one of the only air-conditioned bathrooms in all of County. And you know that stuff I said about finding calm within chaos? Nothing really speaks to calm quite like a cool bathroom in the county. So I did not pass up this opportunity. And as I turned to leave the bathroom, standing before me, blocking the door, there's a guy asking me for drugs. And at that moment, I look down at his hand, and I see he's clutching a knife, shaking. I was trapped, and it was a bad situation. I tried to convince him that I didn't have drugs, but I knew where they were kept. He didn't go for that story, though. Instead, the guy flips out, and with rage in his eyes, he stabs me in my abdomen. And when the knife went in, I dropped to my knees, and I waited for that second blow to my back. But it never came. Instead, he ran off, and I thought to myself, I am not dying here. There is no way. I've made it this far. This is not how my story is going to end. I staggered out. I leaned against the wall. I called for help, and I waited. And within minutes, I'm on a stretcher getting rolled into that same trauma room, and they park me right next to Daisy. Daisy sees me. She turns to her mother and says, "Mama, that's my doctor." It was crazy. But I am happy to report that both Daisy and I survived our physical wounds that night. But I think about Daisy to this day, about her randomly getting shot, walking with her mother in her neighborhood, just going to the store. What were her chances of getting out of that neighborhood alive? Did she even live long enough to find out? Could someone have intervened to redirect the course of that little girl's life? But that's why we're gathered here tonight. Kids trapped in poverty or households of abuse can be saved, but they need help. They need our help. In fact, there is a person here tonight and a group of people in the audience who did, in fact, reach out to save a boy's life. That incredible, selfless hero is David Richter. Many here tonight know David, but for those who don't, he's with Grosvenor, where he serves as managing director and chairman of the investment committee. It's a story that some of you know, but many, I suspect, don't. The boy David saved was a 12-year-old that grew up in a world of unspeakable abuse. The boy's father was an abusive alcoholic, his brother a drug addict, and his mother, unable to cope with the horror of her life while trapped within her own mental illness, committed suicide when he was 15. The boy lived in secrecy, almost hiding in plain sight. Nobody recognized the darkness that boy returned to every day after school, and is all too often the case with human tragedy, most opt to look the other way, all while the boy's suffering continued. But not David Richter. Upon meeting the boy, David recognized the true person within that hardened facade. He befriended the child and he guided him. He opened up his heart and opened up his family to the boy. And when the boy turned 16 and could no longer survive the conditions upon which he had been forced to endure, David provided the boy with a home and a family. He replaced the boy's despair with hope and direction. He took that boy with a fractured soul and made him believe that he could do anything with his life. He taught him to never allow anything or anyone obstruct his goals. I know that intimate details of that story tonight, and I'm able to share that with you all because that 12-year-old boy was me. David and his family, who I now lovingly refer to as my brother and my family, transformed my world of hate and abuse into a world of love and compassion. Let no one doubt that David Richter's incredible act of kindness and the love of his family saved my life. I am alive to tell you this story 40 years later because of David and the family he gave to me. And I am a husband deeply in love with my wife, Laura, because David opened my eyes to a world of love. I'm a devoted father of 2 teenage boys because David showed me the way of family. And I am a neurosurgeon only because David instilled within me the fact that my life had a purpose. And isn't that eradication of abuse and neglect exactly what HFC implores us to consider? Think about where our society might be today if the abused kids we are trying to help had the impact of a David Richter in their lives, or if more kids had the incredible generosity of all of you gathered here tonight. And for the many of you hearing the heroic story of David Richter and his family for the first time tonight, please don't be lulled into the inaccurate interpretation of this account as a survival story on my behalf, for that is neither the intent of my comments nor an accurate interpretation. But rather, it is a story about hope, a story about compassion, and about how random acts of kindness can change the world. Without hope, I never would have survived the horrors of my childhood. And without random acts of kindness and the compassion of others, I never would have achieved my dreams of becoming a husband, a father, and a neurosurgeon. Abuse can take on many forms: physical, sexual, emotional, neglect, but the outcomes are all equally terrifying to consider. Every 10 seconds, there is a report of child abuse. And last year, in our country, the United States, 1,600 kids died as a result of abuse or neglect. That's 4 to 5 kids a day. And in one study, 80% of 21-year-olds who had suffered childhood abuse met the criteria for at least one psychological disorder. You see, as a child, when you were abused, you believe that it's your fault. You believe that you are worthless. You might ponder whether death might be a better alternative than life. And I can assure you that the kids who grow up in homes of abuse or of parents who are addicts somehow always believe they brought it on themselves, that they were the cause of their own suffering. And there is no doubt that the kids we are trying to help tonight share these devastating emotions. But although I stand before you as a representative of the kids who are suffering silently, I am not here merely to illuminate a dark side of our society. As I said earlier, I am here to focus on hope. You see, there exist numerous antidotes to the poison of abuse, and tonight's function is just one great example. As I also said, most people tend to look away from tragedy, but not all of you. By virtue of your participation tonight, you have elected to stare it down, and more importantly, you have elected to do something about it. And as I look out across this room, I am moved by your generosity and by taking on this cause as a philanthropic pursuit. And on behalf of all the kids you are impacting, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. The cures to this disease come in both large and small forms. Sometimes just a brief encounter can change someone's life forever. For me, it happened when I was in the first grade, and my sense of worth in this world was already virtually bankrupt. My mother, already crippled by her mental illness, takes me to my parent-teacher conference. And as you might imagine, going places with her was sometimes unsettling. So I wasn't exactly looking forward to this. So we arrive, and my teacher, Mrs. Shaven, says to us, to me, out of nowhere, David is a special child. He can be anything he wants when he grows up. That one random act of kindness, those beautiful, sweet words spoken to me by my teacher, likely changed the trajectory of my life and may have been the catalyst to my dream of becoming a surgeon that I've held with me ever since the first grade. And having that dream as something to strive for gave meaning to my life. In essence, it was my lifeline. I often reflect upon my journey. As a little boy, I was dealt a difficult hand, but my story turned out all right. I love my life and I love my career, and I am doing everything I can to make sure that my 2 sons have a better start in their life than their father did. I have achieved my dreams and beyond. And still I ask myself, is that all I can do? Is that all we can do? And maybe it's not. I think about how important my first grade teacher is. I think about her words of encouragement. I think about my friendship and my brotherhood with David Richter in the love, the never-ending love of his family. And I think about the life I have built with Laura. And I am truly humbled. But we've all been touched by the kindness of others. I recently finished a book by J.R. Doty titled Into the Magic Shop, and if you haven't read it, I strongly recommend it because it just might change your life. In the book, Dodi talks about meeting the Dalai Lama, who gets asked about his religion, to which the Dalai Lama succinctly responds, "My religion is simple. My religion is kindness." And ladies and gentlemen, the story of my life is equally simple. Random acts of kindness can not only uplift others, they can inspire us all to lead richer lives. They can transform our relationships with those we love most. In closing, I want to thank you all for allowing me to share my story and my belief that kindness may be the world's most abundant yet underutilized resource. The more of this resource we spend, the richer we will all be. Thank you.